You're listening to the premiere episode of Misfire. Support for the show is brought to you by the Urban EV Podcast. Live in a city and drive or are considering an EV? Does user experience in a sustainable future powered by EVs fill your heart with joy? Well, this pod's for you. Tune into the Urban EV Podcast, available now on your favorite streaming platform. A hired car, the Fisker Ocean, glides silently through present-day Manhattan. Its lines are elegant. Its design, timeless. Still to most passengers, it's just another ride. But this car's story is anything but ordinary.
Dreams go up in smoke.
I don't think everything needs to have 23-inch wheels to be beautiful, Henrik.
Elon Musk was like the PayPal guy. I think a lot of people thought Fisker might have been the one that would sort of lead us into the electric future.
I mean, it's unique look and styling. There wasn't anything out there like it.
The chemistry had game-changing capability, and we could deliver 10 times the power. So suddenly, a lithium-ion battery that would last forever. I mean, like, wow, what could you do with that?
This car carries a story, one of glamour and collapse, of rivalry and redemption. A story of $500 million in government bets, of lawsuits and fires, of bold ambition undone. And at its center, Henrik Fisker. In the late 2000s, while Elon Musk was desperately trying to keep Tesla afloat, another electric dream was taking shape. This one from a rock star car designer with a resume that included James Bond's BMW Z8. Henrik Fisker wasn't just building a car, he was building a statement. A hybrid-powered, solar-roofed eco-luxury sports sedan called the Karma. The government backed it up with $500 million. A-list celebrities such as Leonardo DiCaprio and Justin Bieber lined up to buy it. And for a brief shining moment, it looked like Tesla might not win the race to the future of electric cars. But then, batteries caught fire. A hurricane wreaked havoc. The company burned through cash faster than it could build cars, as one of the most ambitious automotive startups in U.S. history began to feel the heat. This is Misfire. On today's episode, we will cover the story of Henrik Fisker and his automotive brands, of ambition, failure, and the unpredictable road to revolutionizing the auto industry. Because even when visionaries drive off a cliff, sometimes they come back for another lap. Henrik Fisker's journey began far from the bright lights of auto shows. He was born in Denmark, raised with an eye for elegance. From a young age, he sketched cars endlessly, fascinated not by engines, but by beauty and motion. That obsession carried him to design school, then to BMW, where his bold proportions caught the industry's attention. By the late 1990s, Henrik's work became legend. The BMW Z8, immortalized in the James Bond film The World Is Not Enough. Then, the Aston Martin DB9, redefining elegance and luxury. He was no longer a designer. He was an auteur, with a singular vision for what cars could look like.
Well, he was a very dapper figure, dressed incredibly. He was impeccable looking.
Another who saw the aura firsthand was Jim Motivali, a veteran automotive journalist who has written for the New York Times and Barron's.
He was very well spoken. He talked a good game. Plus, he had the history of designing some really exciting cars.
And that style sort of energy that he came from, the design studio, mentality, they wanted you to see that it was a little luxurious, a little bit more, swoopy and designy.
Sebastian Blanco, who has covered EVs for Autoblog and Car and Driver, remembers his first impressions.
And that came through every time you talked to him, every time you met with him. He was always very put together, but it did give a real sense of competence.
But Henrik wanted more. He didn't just want to design for others. He wanted his own company, his own badge. And in 2007, he founded Fisker Automotive. Its first car, the Karma, promised to change everything. A plug-in hybrid that could drive on batteries, but with the ability to fall back on gasoline when needed.
He managed to design a car that was so low and striking and good-looking.
We spoke to Car and Driver contributing editor and former editor of Green Car Reports, John Volker.
I got one to test in New York City, and it is the only test car I've ever driven where 3 separate construction workers swiveled and did a 180 as it drove past. No one had ever seen a 4-door sedan that low, that sleek, riding on 22-inch wheels. He had an eye for design.
It was bold. It was beautiful. and yet similar to a transformational supercomputer-backed project being pursued in Detroit. General Motors had its own plug-in hybrid program underway, the Chevy Volt. Unlike Fisker's $100,000 luxury sedan, the Volt was aimed at everyday drivers, affordable, practical, engineered for reliability. And the man who would later lead Fisker Automotive, Tony Posawatz, was at that very moment leading GM's Volt program to production.
I have the unique distinction of having led the team that developed the Cadillac Escalade, the Chevrolet Avalanche, and most notably, we launched in 2010 the Chevrolet Volt. To many, the car was quite stunning. And as a vehicle that was a PHEV, you didn't have to worry about charging.
Both cars promised to solve the same problem, electric driving without the fear of running out of juice. And that was really important in the early days of electric vehicles without a robust charging infrastructure. The Karma dazzled on the auto show stage, but its beauty depended on batteries, power supplied not by Detroit, but by a young Massachusetts startup, A123 Systems, an MIT spinoff hailed as a pillar of American clean tech.
There were 15 or 20 brand new startups building electric cars with funding from the U.S. Department of Energy, and we were right in the middle of it.
Its CEO at the time, Dave Vio, can still feel the optimism.
I remember not being a battery guy, but being a tech guy saying, wow, this really you could really make electric cars with this stuff. There's a Rigoni plot that says, hey, it's got this crazy life characteristic and power capability that the other materials like LCO and LMO and the other chemistries that are in use, I wonder if this will work. I mean, if this works, it's going to change the game.
A123 had the golden ticket in their hands, but now had to figure out a way to cash it in.
We had the technology, we had the U.S. government, we had 7 years of funding from the government proving we could do it. We put together a program with the government, we got in line, and we got funded to build our factory. We got Michigan to give us $23 million to build a factory in Michigan. We got the federal government to give us $250 million to basically cooperatively fund it. We could go out and raise money. We went out and raise money on the public, raise $400 million, and suddenly we're in great position. But what do we really do to get those 20,000 batteries? There was one answer at this point. Fisker.
Fisker and A123, a designer's dream, and a scientist's breakthrough joined together to build America's future. But Henrik wasn't the only one with his eyes on the prize. In Silicon Valley, Tesla also was rising. At first, it was a symbiotic relationship. Elon Musk hired Fisker to do early design work on the Model S, Tesla's groundbreaking sedan that quite literally kickstarted the EV revolution. But eventually, their two competing visions of the future would collide. Jim Modavalli, who interviewed both men at the time, remembers the bitterness.
There was real bad blood between Henrik and Elon, having to do with that early work that Fisker did on the Model S. Elon is always very upfront about people he doesn't like, and he told me all kind of vitriol about Henrik. So I guess they had an early friendship that went really sour.
Tesla sued Henrik and his design team, accused of stealing confidential information and designs. Fisker countersued and won. The press cast it as a duel, Musk the engineer, Fisker the designer.
It really was a toss-up between which company would, frankly, come out ahead.
For context from Detroit, we turn to Greg Migliore, longtime journalist and current editor-in-chief of Autoblog.
You know, I think a lot of people thought Fisker, based on the strength of their design, some of the partners they had, Henrik's credibility, might have been the one that would sort of lead us into the electric future.
I cannot remember how many times we used Tesla killer in various headlines and stories back in the day, because that was the company to gun for. But Fisker at the time had the best chance to approach Tesla because it's doing something very, very similar.
Sebastian Blanco recalls the strategy.
It was aiming for the higher market, focused on design, coming at it with a higher price point and a little zing instead of just here's a mass market Leaf. And so Fisker came in and said, hey, here's this amazing looking vehicle. And yeah, that got a lot of attention.
Sebastian had the chance to interview Henrik Fisker back in 2013. Clearly, he relished the fight.
The difference with us was, of course, that you have a microscope on you because you're a new company. Right. We've had a lot of naysayers. I've had to live with this for 4 years. I have a thick skin. Everybody writing in the blogs and the media going, they're never going to make it. It's vaporware. They're never going to have the cars. Never going to make it. So when you hear that, every week, you almost get stronger and you want to prove people wrong.
And for a brief moment, they did. By 2012, the Karma was on the road. Celebrities drove it. Early reviews lauded its stunning design and innovative technology. But underneath the surface, cracks were beginning to form. Jim Othavali, who test drove a Karma himself, remembers.
I tested it for the New York Times. I got an early one, and the check engine light was on the whole time I was driving it. And there was like people from Fisker sitting in the back seat saying, it's a pre-production model. You have to expect these things. And it just seemed unfinished. It was not, this is the one they brought to the New York Times. It's the best one they had. And it was, didn't feel screwed together very well.
If the Karma was fragile, its foundation was even more so. From the start, Fisker had been fueled by government money. The Department of Energy awarded the company a $520 million loan, part of a push to jumpstart America's clean energy future. For Washington, Fisker was a bet that the U.S. could compete with Japan and China in advanced vehicles. But it wasn't just about innovation, it was also about politics.
The 2012 election was underway, and this was Romney v. Obama.
Tony Posawatz frames the situation.
At the time, the Republicans were looking for the next Cylindra, and Fisker became the poster boy of that.
Cylindra, the solar panel manufacturer turned clean tech failure, had gone down along with $535 million in the defaulted loan from the government. Congress wanted wins, not excuses. Yet across Silicon Valley, another Department of Energy loan recipient was making headlines of its own. Tesla had borrowed $465 million under the same program. By 2013, it would pay that loan back in full. Fisker, meanwhile, was struggling just to keep the lights on. And the fate of Fisker's DOE loan was tied to an increasingly fragile partner, A123 Systems. Once celebrated as America's battery champion, A123 was now drowning in red ink. Dave Vio remembers the impossible pace.
We had never built this pack in production. We had never built any such pack of that scale in production. And we were building a brand new factory with funding from the federal government. That factory had never been built. Coating lines, production assembly lines, everything. Cell assembly had never been done at that scale. And we were doing all of it in brand new buildings in Michigan, cooperatively with the development of the pack. So the situation was difficult, but that's what we did. I mean, if you look at this, it's a cliffhanger, but you're going to go and and by the way, if you make some bad ones, you'll fix them, you'll go, that's what we're going to do. They're going to do this and everybody's going to go. But you knew, and I remember a conversation I had with one of their principal investor, Kleiner Perkins, and I sat with the Sand Hill Cove, and I sat with that guy and I said, you do know there's big problems here. You do know what's going to happen. You can't build this kind of complex technology, packs and cars, and put them all together and ship them out the door and not expect this.
And the problems, they did come.
Fisker was building the cars in Scandinavia. The battery packs were flying over Scandinavia. They were coming back in the cars on the ship. The ships were coming into a port. Issues like, for example, we got a call, there's a serious problem. Cars coming in the port aren't working. They take them off the thing and they basically roll them off. They run them and they drive them into a parking lot. They weren't going. It's your battery. It's your battery. So teams flew in, investigation occurred, 7x24 work hours, everybody going crazy. It wasn't our battery. There was a problem that Fisker had never tested a condition in which the car door was left open, so that at the port, they were driving the car out. The guy would leave the door open. The door was draining the lead acid battery, not our battery. And there was a mode in which the car, if the lead acid battery died, the whole thing died. And so the car died not because of our battery died. The software that integrated together said, hey, that thing's got to be working. If it doesn't, shut the car down. So, okay. They never went through the process of enough cars to know. And all of a sudden, there were dozens of these little things occurring in the vehicle. Little engineering things that they weren't crisis, but that's not where you are in production. That's what you do before production. And this was happening every day.
But soon, A123 had real defects on its hands.
There was a Consumer Reports review, and in that review, it came back that the driver's car died. And here he is driving his beautiful Fisker car, and it's dead. And of course, we got the call and it said, it's your battery. Your battery died. So, wow, Consumer Reports, public company, right? in the limelight, how you feeling? I know exactly where my car was when that call came. I was sitting in my car, and I knew exactly where it was. I flew to Michigan, sat down with the team, and we held 2 days of reviews all day, all hands. And the engineering report came back and said, it is our battery. And it turns out that the root cause of the problem was welder B. It was a series of welders, and one of the welders was mispositioning a little piece of copper by a fraction of a millimeter, in just enough that it was creating a little bit of a short on side there. And it wasn't happening in the line. It was happening as a latent defect, meaning it would show up later. It was something that would happen in the course of cycling the battery, and then the problem would occur. And they were randomly distributed such that it was likely that this would affect all the packs. So here we had built, I think, 1,500 packs, and they were all suspect.
For Fisker, the timing couldn't have been worse. The DOE had already frozen its loan after Fisker missed production milestones. Washington grew impatient. Republicans sharpened their knives. Every flaw in a Karma was now a headline. Every problem at A123, a black eye for the administration's clean tech program. And then, on the eve of the recall, the final blow.
There was a lot of pressure on, as a public company, when you know you have a problem, when do you make the announcement? Because you can get sued as a CEO of a public company if you're holding information that investors would consider pertinent to their investment. So you've got to tell them. But we needed to get our ducks in a row. We needed to know what it meant. What were the consequences? So we found out Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock. We couldn't be ready by Monday. We said we'll do it Tuesday morning. We will have enough time then to actually be able to make an intelligent statement to the market of what this means, how we're going to recover, how we're going to cover it. Fisker leaked it out on Sunday afternoon to a reporter and said, that problem isn't us, it's them. And I got a call from a reporter on Sunday, and he said, I'm going to press. It will break tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock. You're either talking or not. We stayed up all night long. At 7 a.m., we issued a press release, and we basically made the announcement that we had this recall that was coming. It was a $50 million problem. And we covered it to the best of our ability, but we covered all the bases. But I can tell you, I was pissed. All right. That was dirty pool in my view, and it created a tone. And the reason I've taken the time on this story is you got to understand, Fisker was a great promise and a really wonderful car. It was beautiful. And Henrik's a dynamic guy. And the excitement around that was great. But the execution of that project was poor in all phases. And it led to the circumstances that created this.
October 2012, it was over. A123 Systems filed for bankruptcy. That same month, clouds gathered off the coast of Africa, which developed into a tropical storm, and finally, a hurricane barreling up the east coast of the United States. Its name was Sandy. At Port Newark, hundreds of Karmas sat parked awaiting delivery. The storm surge hit the coast. Salt water poured into the lots. 16 vehicles ignited into flames. Photos spread online. Luxury green cars engulfed by fire, burning against the hurricane winds. Henrik Fisker recalls.
Sort of a weird feeling because it's brand new car standing in 5 feet of water for 24 hours. I mean, basically, they're done. Their history. There's nothing you can do. It felt like every time you saw one problem, there was another coming.
Right.
So it just didn't stop.
Right.
And I will have to say, I never thought I had to go through so much obstacles to get, a car on the road and get, to where we are today.
You couldn't have written a worse metaphor. A green car, meant to be the future, literally burned by the sea. 3 disasters, a Consumer Reports PR debacle, A123's bankruptcy, Sandy's destruction, and finally, a congressional review of the $500 million bet made by the DOE on Henrik Fisker. The perfect storm had landed. Fisker Automotive was reeling. Its sole battery supplier, A123 Systems, had filed for bankruptcy. Hurricane Sandy had drowned hundreds of cars at Port Newark. The company was collapsing. And into this chaos stepped a man who just months earlier had been celebrated as one of Detroit's quiet revolutionaries. Henrik Fisker himself was no longer CEO. In February 2012, the board had pushed him into an executive chairman role after the DOE froze its loan. Chrysler veteran Tom Lasorda was brought in to stabilize operations. He lasted just months. By August, Lasorda was gone, and Fisker appointed its third CEO in less than a year. Tony Posawatz, the man who had just launched GM's Chevy Volt.
My role with the Volt was one of delivering the product on time, on budget, doing something unique and profound. And so I received an interesting offer from Fisker Automotive to be their CEO.
The irony couldn't be ignored. The Volt had proven that a plug-in hybrid concept could work under disciplined execution. Now Tony was expected to bring that discipline to a company already on the brink of collapse.
I was the lucky guy that once I joined, many bad things happened. We had a Consumer Reports, a bit of a hit piece about a problem they had with a test vehicle. We had A123 go bankrupt. We had Hurricane Sandy trash about a third of our inventory. So it all hit us at once. And so when I joined in August of 2012, the Fisker Automotive team had launched their first product, the Fisker Karma. It was launched in haste, and it had a number of problems, quality and otherwise. So my first perspective and focus area was fix the product and take care of those customers that took a chance and risk on us.
But the problems at Fisker ran deeper than the product.
Henrik was certainly interested in the appearance elements. We had a certain number of debates about, I don't think everything needs to have 23-inch wheels to be beautiful, Henrik. I had an old Chevy Corvette with 15-inch wheels, and it was lovely. It was a 1967. So this is a little bit where we got into a challenge. And, we worked through most of the issues, but when you're working through issues in very turbulent and troublesome times, it makes it even more challenging.
But beyond the internal challenges, the external ones soon took center stage. Suppliers demanded cash up front. Dealers grew wary. Political scrutiny mounted in the 2012 presidential election cycle.
We had 3 Romney-Obama debates, and 2 out of 3 of them, Fisker was referenced in the debate. It must have been of national importance, if you will. But what that does is it scared dealers, it had scared investors, and so it piled on to some of the other challenges that we had.
Tony had delivered the Volt at GM, a triumph of execution. At Fisker, he was asked to deliver a miracle with no time, no cash, and a crumbling foundation.
There was a point in time when a number of Chinese OEMs were looking at investing in Fisker. And this was about the time that the President Xi was installed. And we had heard from sources that Geely, which had purchased Volvo in the past in that time frame, was in fact very interested, but they didn't want to compete with 3 or 4 other Chinese companies. And they got the leadership in China to make the others back down. And so the Western companies were always a little slower, took them a little bit more time. And so when we realized that a number of the Chinese companies and others were backing out, well, we lost any possible leverage, if you will. And that was kind of, I'll call, the beginning of the end.
By April 2013, Fisker Automotive filed for bankruptcy. Jim Motivali.
The Republican Party at that time was looking for failures in the EV, and the fact that Fisker went under, still owing $500 million to the government, was a pretty powerful piece of ammunition to use against EVs at the time. And it was a black eye for EVs. It's not all political. It was a pretty spectacular failure because that's a lot of money.
But Henrik wasn't done. He returned from the wilderness in 2016 with the launch of Fisker Inc. and plans for an affordable, stylish, solar-roofed SUV called the Ocean. It was a new EV era, and Fisker followed the money. With Tesla's exponential growth starting to make headlines, it was fertile ground to raise funds and make yet another run for glory.
The Fisker Ocean, I thought it was a rather attractive-looking SUV. Henrik had done just about everything you could to make an SUV look exciting while retaining some practicality.
I think the looks of the Ocean were great. Like it had, I like the style. Henrik knows how to design a car.
I do believe that the Fisker Ocean was a very attractive car, right price point, right segment of the market.
While everyone we spoke to seemed to be impressed by the Ocean, John Volker, well, he saw things a little bit differently.
It's hard to make a stunning SUV. Lamborghini has done their best, but basically it's still a tall wagon, right? So the Ocean was less immediately visually stunning, for one, Number two, it was at that point a sort of, okay, do we need another startup car company? Why is this happening? Clearly, they're not going to get any loans from the U.S. government.
Yet investors bought in. Fisker Inc. raised over $1 billion in a SPAC IPO. Analysts whispered, the next Tesla.
The search for the next Tesla. There has to be another one here.
Tony Posawatz channels investor enthusiasm to get behind the next big thing.
And it just so happens that the SPAC phenomena allowed many of these companies to get a lot of cash in a time frame when autos need cash. They are hungry and cash-eating machines.
But hints of trouble came early. Missed deadlines, supplier grumbling, customers reporting buggy test drives. The unraveling came fast. Delays turned into lawsuits. Cars stalled mid-drive. Screens froze. Doors jammed. Jim Odavalli remembers the scale of the complaints.
Over 100 loss of power incidents with these cars. All these owners were stranded. It was an ugly scene.
Even worse, inside the company, the leadership structure sowed additional doubt. Henrik's wife, Geeta Gupta Fisker, who originally had held the COO title, was now installed as the CFO. For a publicly traded company, the concentration of power was unusual and destabilizing.
I think Henrik wanted to have someone he trusted, but it was highly unusual to have that kind of a setup.
Tony Posawatz, no longer associated with the Fisker brands at this time, recalls his reaction.
And when I was asked by people, what do you think about it? People that were doing due diligence, I told them, frankly, it's highly unusual and not necessarily recommended.
And then the cultural death blow. In February 2024, Marquise Brownlee, also known as MKBHD, posted his review of the Ocean on the Autofocus YouTube channel to his millions of followers, titled, "This is the worst car I've ever reviewed." Yes, that was the actual title. The video was brutal. It didn't just hurt the Ocean, it destroyed any trust Henrik had left. That was the death knell. Investors bolted. The stock collapsed. By April 2024, Fisker Inc. was bankrupt. It was deja vu all over again. And Tesla, with a market cap of over $1 trillion today, well, that's a different story.
In the end, Tesla is the more remarkable story because it did, against all the odds, actually succeed. Fisker did not. So the fact that they will be remembered for this striking design, albeit it had mechanical flaws and all the rest, I think will keep the company remembered. But how many of the car companies that were around in 1920 do we remember? Not very many.
And one more remarkable thing, while Henrik technically failed, remember the first time Fisker went bankrupt? Well, it didn't quite end there. After all the Chinese car manufacturer jockeying, Wang Chung, a conglomerate best known for automotive components, purchased the assets of both A123 and Fisker Automotive. They've rebranded the company, now called Karma. And the Karma car? Stay with me. It's been re-engineered and is now called the Rivalry. You can purchase one today. But a funny thing happened on the way to Fisker Inc.'s insolvency. The cars didn't exactly vanish either. A taxi and limousine rental company based in the New York City borough of the Bronx called American Lease scooped up nearly 3,000 Oceans for pennies on the dollar. Cars once worth $70,000 sold for $16,000. Now they roam New York City as ride-hail cabs. You can catch one next time you use your Uber app. So here we are in 2025, and looking back at Henrik Fisker's legacy, it's a mixed bag. He was brilliant, bold, flawed, but still, he gifted the automotive world with stunning designs and made a play to make his name synonymous with the great American stalwart brands such as GM, Tesla, and Ford. Actually, there's another name that didn't quite make it to that list either, and we'll leave it up to Greg Migliore to remind us.
You know, Fisker Automotive in its first and second and any other subsequent offshoot forms, they didn't quite have the business acumen to make it work. You know, and if they did, they didn't execute on it. Ultimately, that's where it kind of fell short. So if he gets a spot somewhere between, I don't know, somewhere between Elon Musk and John Z. DeLorean, you know, as far as like leaders that had big ideas and were larger than life characters.
But Dave Vio, looking back at A123, sees another legacy.
If you go back at the time, the big thing that happened in the 90s was GM made an electric car, and they killed the electric car. There's movies about it. And they killed it really because they had lead-acid batteries that would only last a year or two, and they knew it. And so as much emotion as there was around that, it was a joke. I mean, you can't make electric cars with lead-acid batteries. Anybody in the industry would know that. But a lot of pundits, a lot of people wanted it. They said, hey, GM, you killed the electric car. No, they never really had an electric car. The electric car vision needed batteries that would be durable and would last and would power and would operate. And A123 was the first company to recognize that. And the technology we created, it is the technology that China is using. LFP that A123 commercialized is the technology that China Inc. is using, CATL, all of them. It is what they're doing in China. It has turned out to be the panacea. It is the right technology. It's more cost effective. It's more durable. It's better. It's more available, all the stuff that we talk. And they're using it for the grid, and they're using it for automotive.
From Massachusetts factories to Port Newark's burning docks, from Bond's BMW to Midtown traffic, from billion-dollar IPOs to taxi medallions, Henrik Fisker set out to change the world. Twice he fell short, but his cars endure, not in celebrity garages, not as symbols of Silicon Valley triumph, but in the hands of working drivers, ferrying strangers through New York City traffic. And maybe that's fitting, because here, in the backseat of a cab, Henrik Fisker's dream still lives on, one fare at a time. You're listening to the premiere episode of Misfire, automotive stories of ambition, innovation, and the moments when it all comes undone. If Henrik Fisker's rise and fall left you hooked, there's more where this came from. In upcoming episodes, we'll uncover high-stakes dramas from the world of cars and business, stories of bold bets, billion-dollar gambles, and the people who dared to change the game. Make sure you don't miss what's next. Follow Misfire wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a review if you enjoyed the ride. The road ahead is full of twists and turns, so buckle up. We're just getting started. An extra special thank you to our sound engineer and mixer, Rocio Garcia. I'm Rob Hoffman, and this is Misfire.